Welcome to Books and Booze, a bookish and wine and juice podcast. Whether you're a fan of books, wine, or true crime, this is the place for you. Pour yourself a glass of whatever you enjoy and enjoy the show. Cheers!
Oh, hey there, all you cool cats and kittens. Yes, that was a Tiger King reference. If you haven't seen it, go watch it right now on Netflix. It is bizarrely amazing. Quarantine has me going a little bit stir crazy. So I decided to dust off one of my first books I ever wrote called The Other Woman. It does have a Goodreads page, and I did have a couple of beta readers quite a while ago for it, but I'm starting to think I might rewrite the entire manuscript and give it a polishing up, and maybe re-release it to the world. So I thought today what I would do is read you the introduction and the first chapter. This is very different because it's not a thriller book. It is a romance book, which I don't know, I might try and put a bit of a thriller twist on it this time around, but kind of not my normal type of book these days. I am definitely not a romance novelist anymore. I write about abducting people and chopping their toes off, so yeah, a bit dark, aren't I? So what I'll do is I'll read you the premise of the book that is on Goodreads. The truly good stories in life are the ones where the characters go through a certain amount of turmoil and pain. A story becomes amazing when said characters overcome all that they have to go through. All that's left is the ending, good or bad. In our situation, we have no idea how it will end. I'm really hoping for a great ending, but in the meantime, we just have to keep writing. The story needs to have pain and conflict. There are still so many pages to go until we see the end. Tabitha's life was at a standstill. The sun, surfing, photography, and driving through the same streets every day had gotten her stuck in a rut. When she meets Ezra, she has no idea that her life is about to be permanently altered. But Ezra has a secret, and Tabitha's conditioned life is about to fall completely apart. She's about to become the other woman. All right, here we go. I'm going to start with the introduction. Now, the thing about this book is that I named every chapter after a song. So it's actually got its own Spotify playlist that I put together years ago. I think I wrote this back in 2012. So you can just imagine how much I've changed with my writing style and all that since then. So the first chapter is titled The Heart Wants What It Wants, which is a song by Selena Gomez. And the first chapter is a article by Cosmopolitan magazine, which, well, it's not actually, but I wrote it like it was. Anyway, I'm going to shut up now and just get on with the story. What You Didn't Know About the Men That Deviate from Their Spouses, written by Sasha Nightingale. Everyone has their own idea as to what constitutes a cheater, whether it be merely exchanging a saucy text message, a kiss, or doing the ultimate crime, adultery. Each one of these acts are still regarded as deviating from your partner, the one that you vowed to spend the rest of your life with, in sickness and in health, for richer, for poorer. You know how it goes. With a wide range of new social networking platforms, a lifestyle run by protective passwords, and divorce becoming more acceptable by the minute, it is the perfect era for cheaters to revel in their devious ways of betrayal. So do yourself a favor and read up about some of the main points that you should know about cheating men. It may just come in handy one day. Beware if he's into rock and roll. Following recent studies, above all other genres of music, most cheaters seem to enjoy a good headbang, pardon the pun. The majority of the time, his wife will be drop-dead gorgeous. Usually it's wonderful to hear that it isn't all about looks, isn't it? It's great when a man sees you for your personality and not your cleavage and legs. But in this case, proven by a recent survey by Brown's University, almost 90% of men admit that their wives were better looking than the woman they cheated on her with. Cheating revives the sex drive. Sad, but true. If his marriage has been going through a dry spell, getting intimate with someone new could be just the trick to awaken the libido. Men will be in search of a physical need, not an emotional one. Let's be honest. Men are sweet talkers. They will tell you whatever you want to hear, but all they're really after is a little something else. He's actually usually happy in his relationship. You didn't see that one coming, did you? Just because someone cheats on you doesn't actually mean that they have any intention of leaving their wife. If anything, in a very arbitrary way, it makes them grow closer to their wife and, shockingly, happier. He cheats to fix his marriage. Sorry to the women who really believed that he'd pack up and come and play house with them. That was probably never his intention. even if he told you that it was. The truth is, in some weird logic that us women will never understand, men believe that if they get it completely out of their system, the whole marriage will benefit from it. Part 1. Tabitha. Crap. Tabitha evaluated the points in the article of the latest copy of Cosmopolitan magazine. She had to admit that she was relating to quite a few points, particularly the first one. He'd loved rock music. The second point was also pretty accurate. She discovered after snooping around online and finding a photograph of his wife. She was stunning, sporting a thick Jessica Biel fringe and legs up to the bloody roof. The last 2 points also stood out to her. He told her that he was happy with his wife and that his marriage was now supposedly fixed. What were his words again? Oh yeah, something like, through it all, he'd realised just how much he loved his wife. Fabulous, really. The fourth point, though, just sickened her. If all she'd ever been was someone to help a marriage and drought out, then she was marching right back to the bottle store. Even if he tried to deny it, there had been a huge emotional connection, more than anything she'd ever experienced before. And that was why she was still so hung up on him 2 years later. She tossed the glossy magazine to the foot of the bed and stared up at the ceiling, letting out a sigh as her mind fought to stay positive. Seriously, these days her positive outlook on life was depleting just as fast as her bank balance. The retail therapy, comfort food, and cases upon cases of alcohol were stripping her of cash. But it was the only thing keeping her going. No one ever tells you that you'll be the lowly, self-deprecating woman who looks too old for her age, listens to bloody Christina Aguilera's version of Say Something on repeat in her pajamas that she's been in for over 13 hours straight and guzzles gin and tonic for breakfast. No one. This is not what Tabitha had signed up for. Not at all. Chapter 1. Chapel Song, inspired by We Are the Augustines. 2 years earlier, 24th of September 2012. Tabitha Jane was jolted awake during the early hours of the morning to the sound of her alarm clock going off. Creeping out of bed and carefully padding into the bathroom to brush her teeth, she snuck a quick peek out of the drawn curtains to look at the misted morning outside. It was 5 a.m., a magical time of day just before the golden contrast of colours illuminated the sky with the sunrise. Tying up her wavy hair into a messy bun, she ventured back out into the bedroom to lay a kiss on her boyfriend's cheek. He reeked of stale beer and cigarettes. She and Luke had been together going on 2 years now, yet as hard as she tried, she just couldn't get him to join her on her morning surfs. Luke groaned sleepily at the touch of her soft pink lips against his stubble and felt a strand of her sandy blonde hair tickle his skin. She tucked the strand behind her ear, staring down at him for a few moments, wondering where it had all gone wrong. They had once been so happy, so in love. It had started off as any relationship would have, with a honeymoon stage of laughter, lust, and games. That stage had eventually fizzled out as they'd gotten to know each other and became comfortable in the relationship. As they started to learn each other's flaws and habits, their relationship had started going downhill. If she was honest, most of the things that she found she didn't like about Luke were all surface issues, shallow dislikes that should be overlooked, but somehow she just couldn't shake the feeling that they weren't right for each other. Luke had sensed the distance growing between them, which had inevitably led to drinking a lot more than usual, until it became a routine to crack open a case of beer every single night. In turn, he had become arrogant and aggressive. His ego took a ginormous knock, which he took out on her. Although their relationship had turned for the worse, they had become too reliant on each other to pack up their things and call it quits. Through it all, she knew that no one knew her the way that he did. He had become a confident and best friend, even with the mess it had created. And at times, they actually did have fun together. Little glimmers of their old selves would shine through during a good day together, but she knew deep down that it wasn't enough to save their relationship. As hard as they were trying to reconstruct things, they both knew that it wasn't healthy to remain together for much longer. "I'll be back in a few hours," Tabitha whispered, letting herself out of the front door with her surfboard under her arm. Once her board was strapped to her roof racks, she put the key into the ignition and turned the heater on to warm up. Rubbing her hands together, she heard the comforting sounds of Ben Gibbard's voice fill the car as the engine jutted awake in the cold morning. As her Jeep jutted along the silent roads to the beach, she let his lyrics consume her. She pulled into the nearest petrol station to fill up her tank and ordered a takeaway coffee along the way. She filled a polystyrene cup with a frothy caffeine fix and waved goodbye to the exhausted-looking lady behind the counter. As she headed over the hills, she couldn't help but smile at the perfect vision before her. Crisp, fresh waves ready for the taking, accompanied by the salty sprayback of water in the fresh offshore wind. It was all too inviting. Suiting up and strapping the leash around her ankle, she made her way down to the sand dune, clutching onto a bar of surf wax. As she coated her board, she watched the waves and counted the seconds between the breaks. She couldn't wait to get out there. Once she'd chosen the perfect spot to paddle into, she dashed down the hill and into the ocean. She cupped her hands as she paddled, picking herself up onto the board to steal down the face of the first wave of the day. To be a surfer, you need to have patience and loyalty towards the ocean. Tabitha knew that all too well as she bobbed up and down in the water, waiting for the next set of waves to roll in. She loved it out there, and often felt like it was the best place in the world. It was her sanctuary. No one could bother her. It was just her and the ocean was always there. Luke thought that she was crazy that she'd go alone, but she preferred it that way. Of course, 2 years ago, she'd have loved to have him there. It would have been amazing to goof around with him in the water when they first started dating, but she'd grown accustomed to doing it alone, and she enjoyed the feeling of serene peace and tranquility all around her. After her daily surf, Tabitha had a salt-encrusted glowing happiness about her, a feeling that she couldn't get from anything else in life. And that's why she'd given up her day job at the camera store and lived her life entering surf competitions. She'd become sponsored and was literally living her dream. If it wasn't for a failing relationship, Tabitha was fairly confident that she would be the happiest and luckiest woman in the world. Of course, there were other things that she had to do to afford her lifestyle, such as photography. Photography was Tabitha's second love, and she'd set up her own darkroom after finishing her studies at university. She did weddings mainly, which she adored. It gave her so many incredible ideas for her own big day one day. She'd never admit it to Luke, but she dreamt of getting married. She was by all means a hopeless romantic, but she feared that in an attempt to save their relationship, Luke would propose, if he knew that she was planning the perfect wedding in her head. She didn't know if she would be able to crush him even further than she already had by saying no to his proposal. Guilt washed over her as she drew circles in the water with the tips of her fingers. Her closest friend, Diana, had been trying to help her conjure up the courage to end the relationship for months. Sometimes she'd find the strength she needed and would march through the doors to finally put an end to this madness. But something would always stop her. Whether it be that Luke had had too much to drink, or that he was too tired to talk after a day's work, something would tell her that it wasn't the right time. When he'd started to raise his hand to her, she was petrified that he would become violent again if she attempted to break things off. She already had to hide the large bruises across her arms from where he had held her against the bricks in their cottage. If she hadn't washed the dishes properly, he would call her stupid and become infuriated by the tiniest speck on the plate. If his coffee wasn't perfectly sweetened, he'd demand to know if she listened to him at all. She would cry from fear and the feeling of being so inferior to him, but if she tried to leave when they were arguing, it would only fuel the fire. Tabitha let out a sigh and kicked her legs about in the water. Usually, when she surfed, she could forget everything else in the world, but today, things seemed to be plaguing her more than usual. When had her life gotten to this point? Where was the innocent little pigtailed princess that she could only vaguely remember now? After about 2 hours in the ocean, she decided to head back to shore. Unzipping her wetsuit, she turned on the tap for the outside shower by the parking lot. She rinsed off her board before leaning it against the wooden fencing alongside her. "You were great out there," a man's voice spoke from behind her. Turning around to see who it was, Tabitha saw an almost illegally handsome man grinning back at her. Suddenly, Tabitha felt self-conscious about standing there in nothing but her bikini. Goosebumps scattered across every inch of her body as she stared at him. Instinctively, her right hand grabbed her left arm to hide one of the bruises that Luke had left on her. It was 2 days old, the result of his steak being overcooked. "Thanks," she managed to mutter, slinking closer to the steaming shower water to keep warm. With a crazy thick bush of dark brown hair swept to one side and full lips spread open into a cheeky grin, she realized that he was more than gorgeous. He was beautiful. His teeth were perfect enough to be a bloody Colgate ad, for God's sake. He had laughter lines that she couldn't help but want to trace her fingers across, and only the slightest stubble on his strong jaw. She took in his olive skin tone and stocky, muscular build. He must have been about 6 foot. She couldn't see his eyes through his Ray-Ban sunnies, but gathered that they would be just as stunning as the rest of him. A silence lingered in the air as they took each other in, almost unable to tear their eyes off of each other. "Do you surf?" Tabitha eventually asked in order to break the silence. He let out a gravelly chuckle and shook his head. "I've tried it once or twice, but it's been ages. I'm more of a skater. Plus, I think I'd look like a bit of an idiot compared to you," he exclaimed humorously, rattling around the Kit Kat bar he was holding in his hand. "I'm sure you aren't that bad. Skating similar." Tabitha smiled shyly, feeling the temperature of the water before stepping under the shower nozzle. "Yeah, I actually just constructed a skate park in Namibia." "Right though, I should let you shower." He shuffled his feet, noting how beautiful she looked as the water cascaded down her flawless body. With that, he turned to walk away, and suddenly Tabitha felt an urge to run after him. She had to know who he was. She'd never seen him around the beach before, and she was there practically every day. "Are you new to town?" Tabitha stammered as she called out to him, determined not to end the conversation just yet. He sighed heavily as he turned back to face her, and Tabitha picked it up instantly, making her blush crimson. I'm only in the area for the day. My family own a construction site. We're busy building a house here. One of the drivers fell ill, and they kind of needed me to fill in for him. His smile was gentle. Looking out at the waves, Tabitha couldn't believe the disappointment that flooded over her as she heard that he wouldn't be staying in the area. I'm just about to grab a cafe latte and some breakfast before heading back to site. Can I get you anything while you finish your shower? He asked, feeling so annoyed with himself that his eyes couldn't stay focused on her sun-kissed face as she stood beneath the tap. I'd love that. Tabitha's lips broke into a smile, and he smiled back before turning towards the cafe. As she watched him walk away, she took in the rest of him, including how gorgeous his bum looked in a pair of dark Levi's. She bit her bottom lip thoughtfully, somehow knowing that her life was about to take a whole new turn. She didn't know who this guy was, but she knew that he was going to be important. As she pulled on a light brown sequin top, her mind drifted back to Luke. She knew she should be feeling guilty about meeting this guy for breakfast, but yet it felt so right, almost as though there was a driving force edging her towards it. The majority of her friends were all men, and she tried to tell herself that that was why she was feeling so comfortable with the situation, but if she was honest, she knew that this was different. She was undeniably attracted to him, and intrigued on an entirely different level to what she had ever felt with any of her guy friends before. As she walked up to him on the deck outside the cafe, Tabitha kept picking up the smallest little intricacies about him that made him nothing short of fascinating. She could happily stare at him all day. She noted how large and bulky his hands were. The tips of his fingers were covered in calluses, a telltale sign that he played the guitar or did an awful lot of gym. Perhaps both, looking at those muscles practically exploding from his shirt. He saw her approaching and quickly jumped out of his seat to stand. Ezra. He extended his hand and spoke in a heavy South African accent. Tabitha. Her eyes twinkled devilishly as she felt his warm hands in hers. She sat at the small rounded table and told him about her life after giving up her day job and becoming a fully pledged surfer girl. She spoke whimsically of a somewhat fairy tale life, and she could tell that Ezra was mesmerized by her. She was so free-spirited and fun-loving. Everyone that met her could feel the inspiration pouring into them, and he drank all of her up. Maybe I'll see you on the cover of some big surfing magazine one day, Ezra enthused. He was blown away by her. Granted, she was young. As he looked at her, he guessed that she must be in her early 20s. She seemed so mature though, so independent. He engulfed every part of her, hanging on to every single word she spoke. Each was filled with ambition and passion, something that he wished more people had in this world. There was a confidence and a wisdom about her that he'd never seen in someone before, especially so young. It quickly made him overlook the age gap of what he guessed to be about 4 or 5 years. You remind me of someone. Tabitha racked her brain to find out who he looked like. Well, Heath Ledger's a common one, Ezra admitted. I don't know. She analysed him, not entirely sure she agreed. He definitely had a Heath Ledger type jaw, but Heath had nothing on Ezra. May he rest in peace. You just really remind me of someone. It's kind of like I've met you before. She frowned, still eyeing him inquisitively as she tried to suss it out. So you know pretty much everything about me. Now it's your turn, Ezra, she grinned. Well, what do you want to know? They were at a table on a rickety wooden deck, overlooking the waves that were crashing onto the shore. The breeze tasted salty as Tabitha sighed at him. Everything from the things you like, the things you don't, your surname, and the colour of your socks. She laughed. My surname's actually Italian. My father is Italian and my mum's South African, he explained with a deliciously perfect Italian accent, as his surname drawled from his tongue. He seemed to tense up uncomfortably at the mention of family and briefly explained that he'd just had a big falling out with his dad. She got the feeling that he didn't want to discuss it further, so she nodded and let him change the subject. My socks are white, he continued. Just white? Come on, how boring. She lurched towards his jeans and peered at his socks. Okay, well, they've got black stripes around the ankles, he said defensively, laughing deeply at her alluring playfulness. She laughed back, wondering who the hell wore socks and shoes to the beach anyway. The conversation flowed like this all throughout breakfast. Tabitha ordered a cheesy omelette with extra chili, while self-confessed caffeine addict Ezra just kept glugging back the mugs of bottomless coffee. I'm an absolute coffee addict, but it can't be this stuff. Ezra made a face as he pointed down towards his mug. It needs to be the real stuff, right? Made by a barista, none of this instant crap. She agreed. You know, I read somewhere that coffee is responsible for cellulite, so I try and stick to only 1 cup a day, because I'm terrified of the stuff, to be honest. As they spoke, they realised how much they had in common. Inside the cafe, the band, We Are the Augustines, came onto the radio. "This is one of my favourite songs," he told her, before starting to sing along to Chapel Song. She'd never heard the band before, but made a mental note to check them out when she got home. "What other bands do you like?" she asked him. Kings of Leon, Linkin Park, 30 Seconds to Mars. What about you?" "Well, I listen to music for the lyrics. I mean, the melody is beautiful and it definitely completes a song, but I need lyrics to be able to relate and understand." She took a sip of a mixed berry smoothie. "Yeah, I totally agree with you. I've had such a hard time finding new artists and bands that strike the right chord as far as writing goes. Pardon the pun," he joked. "I am actually really loving Mumford & Sons at the moment. It's folk music with a twist. Have you heard them?" she asked. "Of course. They're from London, actually." "Oh, I didn't know that. I miss London. It's been ages since I've been there. Can you imagine seeing them live in London?" "There's one of their tracks that I just haven't been able to stop listening to, White Blank Page." "Okay, this is weird. That's literally my favourite one." He gave her a sad smile, and it confused her. She asked him what was wrong, and he told her that in exactly a week's time he'd be moving to London. Oh, wow. She stumbled over her words, trying to smile and be excited for him, but it wasn't really working. She could tell that Ezra found her attractive. He showed it in his smile and the way that he looked at her. She was still dying to see his eyes from behind his Ray-Bans. The eyes are the windows to the soul. It made her sad to think that they'd soon have to part ways. She hadn't been able to work up the courage to ask for his number, and she doubted whether he would either. She wondered if they should even ask for each other's numbers, or if they should just leave it as a moment in time. Would that always make it a what-if moment? Was it something that should be pursued? Or was it something to just be enjoyed for the moment? These were the questions racing through Tabitha's mind as she felt their time drawing to a close. "Tabitha, I've got to head back to work," he grimaced. "Yeah, of course," she said back, trying to mask her disappointment. "Thanks for breakfast," she quipped as she watched him place a few notes on the table. "It's only my pleasure," he replied, pocketing his wallet as they walked back to her car. He whisked off his sunglasses, perching them on top of his head, and winked at her shyly. Tabitha felt a flurry of emotions rush through her as she took in his dark eyes. She could have toppled right into them. They were like melted Cadbury chocolate. He'd seemed younger to her until she was able to see the delicate lines splattered around the outskirts of his eyes. She tousled up her hair, a nervous habit, before slowly removing her own sunglasses to reveal a pair of aqua blue eyes back at him. "I wish we had more time," Ezra said as he wrapped her up into a big hug that she never wanted to end. As they were saying their goodbyes, Tabitha couldn't help herself. Before she knew it, the question had already escaped her lips. "Are you working tomorrow?" She fumbled with her car keys as she waited for his answer. She knew she shouldn't have pursued it for more than one reason. The first and foremost being that she had a boyfriend, probably still passed out in her bed at home. Nevertheless, being around Ezra made it feel like Luke played no part in her life. It was as though she'd just forgotten all about him and their problems. The second reason she knew that she shouldn't have pursued it was that he was booked on a flight to leave the country permanently in a week's time. "I am. Only for half of the day, but it would take me about an hour's drive to get back to you, plus there's an hour's drive back." He sighed deeply. He was holding onto her small hands, rubbing them with his thumb. "Maybe we could meet halfway, though?" he suggested. Tabitha smiled. "It's weird how the world works. Sometimes I don't get it. It's like whatever plans we have, life has another plan altogether, and nothing's going to stop it from happening. I love those days where something happens that's different for once. You think a day is going to go a certain way, but then it turns out to be completely different from what you expected. Or the days where you wake up and you have absolutely no plans, and you just have no idea where you'll end up. I love watching life unfold." She was rambling now, shy and nervous. He helped her strap her surfboard back to her Jeep's roof racks. "I'll see you tomorrow then, surfer girl." He grinned. He watched as she clambered into the car and drove away. "Wow," he whispered, in a complete daze. There you go, folks. That was chapter one of my first books I ever wrote. The writing is pretty terrible. It needs a lot of work, but let me know what you thought, and if you think you'd be interested in it, let me know. Maybe I'll read you chapter 2 one day. Anyway, I should probably get going and find some coffee in the house, as a self-confessed coffee addict myself. Have an awesome day, and I will talk to you soon. Bye!